Most people assume a slow reply means someone doesn't care. Psychology says it's often the opposite. How a person handles messages quietly reveals how their mind really works. Because a message isn't just a message. It's a small psychological event. A tiny demand on your attention, your memory, your emotions, and your time. And people who reply slowly aren't rude. They aren't cold. They're playing games. They're processing. Their brain is doing something the fast responder's brain often skips entirely. It's weighing, filtering, drafting, deleting, and choosing. And what looks like distance from the outside is usually depth on the inside. Researchers who study attention, communication, and cognitive load keep landing on the same quiet pattern. The people who reply slowest are often the ones taking the message most seriously. They aren't ignoring you. They're thinking about you. And once you understand what's actually happening in their mind, you'll never read a delayed reply the same way again. So let's decode it together. Here are the traits that quietly show up in people who reply slowly to messages and what each one reveals about how their mind really works. The first trait is deep processing over fast reaction. Slow repliers tend to run every message through a longer mental corridor before answering. Psychologists call this reflective rather than reflexive cognition. Fast responders often operate on what Dan Kahneman famously called System 1, the quick, automatic, gut-level layer of the mind. Slow repliers lean into System 2, the slower, more effortful layer that actually considers. From the outside, this looks like hesitation or worse, avoidance. But inside, it's the opposite. It's the mind refusing to give a half-formed answer to something that deserves a real one. And here's the reframe most people miss. In a world addicted to instant reactions, the person who pauses isn't behind. They're simply thinking at a higher resolution. But the next trait is where it gets more human because it isn't about thinking at all. It's about feeling. The second trait is emotional regulation in real time. Slow repliers often delay because they feel a message more strongly than they let on, and they've learned not to respond from the first wave of that feeling. Research on emotional regulation, especially work influenced by James Gross, shows that the healthiest responders don't suppress emotion or explode with it. They create a small gap between feeling and action. That gap is the delay you see. So when someone takes an hour or a day to reply to something tender, tense, or complicated, they're not being distant, they're metabolizing. They're waiting for the version of themselves that can answer with clarity instead of static. And the irony is beautiful. The person who seems the least reactive is often the one feeling the most. The third trait is a low tolerance for shallow replies. Slow repliers usually hate sending anything that feels lazy, robotic, or performative. So instead of firing back a hollow haha or sounds good, they wait until they can say something that actually means something. This links to what psychologists studying communication quality call effortful responsiveness, the idea that meaningful relationships aren't built on speed, but on the sense of being genuinely heard. From the outside, silence looks like disinterest. From the inside, silence is the sound of someone refusing to insult you with a placeholder. And that's a form of respect most people don't notice until it's pointed out. The fourth trait is high cognitive load awareness. Slow repliers are often deeply aware that their attention is finite and they treat it like a real resource, not an infinite feed. Cognitive load theory developed by John Sweller describes how the working mind can only hold so much before performance drops. Chronic multitaskers ignore this. Slow repliers instinctively honor it. So when your message arrives in the middle of their focus, they don't drop everything and half answer you. They let it sit until they can give you their real attention, not the scraps of it. And what looks like being ignored is actually being scheduled. You're not being pushed away. You're being saved for a better moment. If you've ever felt that instinct to leave a message unread until you can honor it properly, the next few traits are going to feel like someone finally naming a habit you've had your whole life. The fifth trait is a strong inner world. Slow repliers tend to live richly inside their own heads, and their internal life doesn't pause just because a notification lights up. This connects to what personality researchers describe as high internal orientation, a mind that generates a lot of its own thought, imagery, and analysis without external input. For these people, the phone isn't the center of gravity. It's a small satellite orbiting a much larger inner planet. They come back to it when they can, not the second it beeps. From the outside, this looks like being unreachable. From the inside, it's simply someone who has somewhere else to be, even if that somewhere is inside their own mind. The sixth trait is decision fatigue sensitivity. Every message, even a friendly one, is a micro-decision. What to say, how to say it, what tone, what timing. Slow repliers feel the weight of those decisions more than most. Research on decision fatigue, popularized by Roy Baumeister, shows that the brain's capacity to make good choices depletes across the day. People with sharper self-awareness tend to protect that capacity fiercely. So they batch replies, they wait for a window when their mind is fresh, they don't answer 12 threads at once with the same tired brain. And what looks like flakiness is actually a quiet form of self-management most people never learn. The seventh trait, and this one is the one people misread the most, is intentional presence. Slow repliers are often the same people who, when they finally do sit down with you, are astonishingly present. They're not scrolling under the table, they're not half listening while typing back to someone else. They're there, fully, because they refuse to split themselves into 6 digital conversations at once. Psychologists studying attention describe this as monotasking, and the research is consistent. The mind that resists constant switching tends to feel calmer, think more clearly, and connect more deeply. So the delay you noticed earlier, it's the same instinct that makes them, later, one of the most present people in your life. The eighth trait is a quiet perfectionism about language. Slow repliers often draft, reread, and edit before sending, not because they're anxious, but because words matter to them. They know a poorly worded sentence can bruise. A misplaced tone can spiral, so they choose language the way a careful cook chooses ingredients, deliberately and with care for who's on the receiving end. This connects to what linguists and communication researchers call audience design, the way skilled communicators shape their words for the specific listener in mind. From the outside, this looks like overthinking. From the inside, it's someone who understands that a message is never just information. It's a small emotional package delivered into someone else's day. Which leads to something more structural, something most people never even think about, that slow repliers are quietly protecting every day. The ninth trait is boundary intelligence. Slow repliers often instinctively understand something most people ignore. That being constantly available trains everyone around you to expect constant availability, and eventually your time stops being yours. This aligns with research on autonomy and psychological well-being, particularly self-determination theory from Deci and Ryan, which finds that a strong sense of control over your own time is one of the deepest predictors of mental health. So slow repliers protect the rhythm of their day, gently and without announcement. They don't publish their boundaries, they just live them. And what looks like distance is often the reason they still have anything real to give you when they do show up. The 10th trait is a discomfort with performative urgency. Slow repliers can sense the difference between something that's actually urgent and something that's just wearing the costume of urgency. Modern messaging trains us to treat every ping as a fire, but most messages are not fires. They're conversations dressed up as emergencies by the design of the app. Slow repliers see through that costume. They ask, quietly, is this actually urgent, or does it just feel urgent because it vibrated? And then they answer accordingly. From the outside, this looks like being out of touch. From the inside, it's someone refusing to let a phone dictate the tempo of their nervous system. And the final trait might be the most surprising, because it flips the whole story. It isn't about distance at all. It's about a kind of caring so quiet most people don't recognize it. The 11th trait is empathy that runs deep enough to slow them down. Slow repliers often care so much about how their words will land that they can't just fire off a reply the way others do. They're imagining you reading it. They're picturing your face. They're anticipating how one sentence might feel 3 hours from now when you're tired and reread it in a different mood. Psychologists call this perspective taking, and it's a core component of what researchers like Simon Baron-Cohen and others describe as cognitive empathy. It's not that they feel less, it's that they feel around every corner of the message. And what looks like coldness is often the exact opposite. It's a mind so tuned to your experience that it refuses to answer carelessly. Now here's what's fascinating when you look at all of these traits together. They keep getting misread as the exact opposite of what they are. The person who's thinking most gets called distracted. The person feeling most gets called cold. The person respecting your time gets called flaky. The person choosing their words carefully gets called avoidant. And the person offering you full presence later gets punished for not offering fragments now. Our culture has quietly confused speed with sincerity, but those two things were never the same. A fast reply can be thoughtless. A slow reply can be devotional. The timing tells you almost nothing. The content and the person behind it tells you everything. And once you notice this, you start to see communication differently. You stop measuring people by how quickly they respond and start measuring them by what actually arrives when they do. Because the friend who takes a day to reply and then writes something that sees straight through your week is not less invested than the one who fires back in 6 seconds. In many cases, they're more. There's a small, private moment slow repliers know well. Opening a thoughtful message from someone they love, reading it twice, feeling it settle, and then closing the app because they don't want to answer it with a tired thumb in a grocery store aisle. That isn't avoidance. That's reverence for the conversation. And if you've ever been called a slow replier like it was a character flaw, you might be quietly relieved to know the research keeps telling a different story. The truth is, the fastest replies in the world are often the least considered, and the slowest are often the most human. Speed is a feature of the phone. Depth is a feature of the person holding it. So here's the question worth sitting with. Which of these traits felt like looking in a mirror? The deep processing, the emotional regulation, the quiet perfectionism about words, the protected inner world? Tell me in the comments. I read every reply, even if it takes me a while. If this one made you feel a little more understood, you'll probably like the video I made on the psychology of people who need long stretches of alone time. It runs on the same quiet wavelength. And if you want more of this, decoding one hidden pattern of the mind every week, calmly and without noise, subscribe and turn on notifications. That's the only way YouTube will actually show you the next one. Because at the end of the day, the way someone handles their messages is really just the way their mind handles the world. And a slow replier isn't behind. They're just answering from a deeper place than most people are willing to go.